Welcome to The Last Calm Word. Let us get started with today's story. I found out my engagement was over from a photo I wasn't supposed to see. It was 3 in the morning. My fiancée was asleep in a tent 200 miles away, and her best friend had just tagged the wrong person in a story that was meant to disappear in 24 hours. In that photo, my future wife was laughing against the chest of a man I'd been told didn't matter anymore. And under it, in her own handwriting font caption, were the words that ended us. Some men are just too insecure to let a girl breathe. She was talking about me. She just didn't know I was awake. My name is Adam. I'm 31. And 11 months ago, I asked Rebecca to marry me on the same pier where we had our first date. She said yes before I even got the ring all the way out of the box. There were people on the boardwalk that day who clapped, strangers, and one old man with a fishing rod who told me I'd made the smartest decision of my life. I believed him. I want you to understand that I was not a jealous man. I need you to believe that. Because the whole story she told the internet depended on me being one. And I spent a long time afterward wondering if maybe she was right. If maybe I really was the problem. I wasn't. But she was very, very good at making me feel like I might be. Rebecca and I met at a mutual friend's housewarming. She was the loudest laugh in the room, and I was the guy refilling everyone's drinks. And somehow, by the end of the night, we were sitting on the back steps, talking until the sun came up. For 2 years, it was the kind of relationship people get quietly jealous of. We cooked together. We paid off her car together. When my dad got sick, she drove 4 hours every weekend with me and never once complained. She sat with him when I couldn't, held his hand through the bad nights, learned the names of all his nurses. At his funeral, she caught me before I fell. Literally, my knees went, and she was just there. And I remember thinking through the fog of the worst day of my life that at least I had her, that whatever else the world took from me, I'd found the one person who would never let me hit the ground. I tell you this so you understand what she actually detonated later. It wasn't a 2-year fling. It was the woman who knew my father's last words. That's the person who wrote that post. That's who I'm talking about. So when the name Damon started showing up, I didn't panic. Damon was the ex. They dated for 3 years in their early 20s. It ended badly. And for the entire time I knew Rebecca, she'd described him as the biggest mistake of my life. Then, about 6 months before the wedding, that phrase quietly changed. He reached out, she said, just to apologize. Closure, she called it. I remember thinking that was actually mature of both of them, and I told her so. That was my first mistake. Being reasonable, because being reasonable is exactly the rope she used later. The texting started slow. A message here. A laugh at her phone there. I'd ask who it was, and she'd say just Damon being dramatic and roll her eyes in a way that made me feel small for even asking. Then the plans started. He was going through a hard time, she said. His mom was in and out of the hospital, and he had nobody. And Rebecca had always been the person people leaned on. I loved that about her. I told myself that loving someone means trusting the version of them that shows up for wounded people. So when she said she wanted to invite him to my birthday dinner, I let it happen. He shook my hand too hard, called me big guy, and spent the entire meal telling stories about a version of Rebecca I'd never met. A wilder one, a younger one who apparently used to do things before she got so responsible. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But I went home that night and lay awake. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like a guest in my own relationship. And it kept getting quieter after that, in the way that things get quiet right before they get loud. The little changes stacked up so slowly that any single one of them sounded insane to be upset about. She started taking her phone into the bathroom. Small thing. She changed his contact name from Damon Do Not Answer to just an initial, a single letter D, with no photo. Small thing. She stopped telling me when he texted and started flinching when I walked behind her while she was typing. Small thing, small thing, small thing. Until one night I made a joke about him. A gentle one. Nothing cruel. And she turned on me so fast it was like flipping a switch. Why are you so obsessed with Damon, she said. It's honestly kind of pathetic. And there it was. The move. The thing I wouldn't have a name for until much later. She'd taken the exact thing she was doing and handed it to me to hold. I was obsessed. I was pathetic. I was the one with the problem. And because I loved her, and because I genuinely could not imagine the woman who drove 4 hours to sit with my dying father doing something cruel on purpose, I took the bag she handed me and I carried it. For weeks. I apologized for noticing. I apologized for asking. I started pre-apologizing before I even brought anything up, softening every question so much that by the end I wasn't really asking anything at all. That's what this kind of thing does to you. It doesn't kick the door down. It just moves the furniture an inch a day until you don't recognize your own house. By the time the camping trip came up, I had been trained, gently and completely, to distrust my own eyes. Here's the part where I need you to not judge me too fast, because when the camping trip came up, I said yes. She framed it as a girls' weekend. Her, two friends, a lake up north, phones off, wine, a fire, the kind of reset every stressed-out bride deserves. I helped her pack. I bought the good bug spray. I filled her gas tank and I kissed her at the door and I told her to have fun and mean it. And she looked at me with those eyes I'd trusted for 2 years and she said, "This is why I'm marrying you. You're not like other guys. You actually trust me." I held on to that sentence for the entire first day. I held on to it right up until her friend Priya, who I later learned was never even invited, posted a story that Rebecca had clearly asked her to keep quiet. It was a group of them around a fire. And there, arm around my fiancé, leaning in to whisper something in her ear, was Damon. Not a girl's weekend, not two friends. Him. I sat up in bed. I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe he crashed it. Maybe he showed up uninvited. Maybe she was uncomfortable. Maybe I was about to be the supportive fiancé she could call crying. So I texted her. Just, "Hey, is everything okay up there?" Saw Priya's story. And I waited. Do you know what it's like to watch 3 dots appear and disappear for 20 straight minutes at 3 in the morning? To watch someone decide how to lie to you in real time. The reply came at 3:41. "Wow. So you're checking up on me now? This is exactly the insecure stuff I can't deal with. It's a group hang, Adam. Grow up. Grow up." I read that word maybe 40 times. And then I made the second worst decision of that night, which was to say, okay, to apologize, to type, "You're right, sorry, have fun, love you," and put my phone face down and stare at the ceiling. Because I still thought this was a fight I could lose gracefully and win the marriage. I still thought the wedding was the finish line and everything before it was just nerves. I was wrong about all of it. I found out how wrong the next morning. I couldn't sleep. So around 7, I got up and made coffee and did the thing you should never do, which is open social media when your stomach is already in knots. And there it was. A brand new post, public. Not a disappearing story this time. A real post on her real profile for all 6,000 of her followers to see. It was a carousel. First slide. Her and the girls, cropped so Damon was invisible, captioned, "Nature reset with my soul people." Cute. Harmless. But she couldn't leave it there. Slide 2 was a long paragraph, the kind of paragraph people write when they want applause. And it was about me. She didn't use my name. She didn't have to. Ladies, real talk. If your man interrogates you for existing without him, that's not love. That's a leash. Some men are just too insecure to let a girl breathe. I'm learning the difference between a partner and a warden. Too insecure to let a girl breathe. My coffee went cold in my hand. 200 people had already liked it. The comments were a pile-on. "Run, girl. Red flag central. You deserve someone secure." Her cousin, who I'd helped move apartments twice, commented 3 fire emojis. Her maid of honor commented, "Preach." These were people who had eaten at my table. And every single one of them thought I was a controlling, insecure man who couldn't let his fiancée go camping. Because that was the story she'd sold. And she'd sold it while sitting next to the ex she'd sworn was the biggest mistake of her life. I scrolled the comments the way you press on a bruise, slowly, on purpose, hating it, unable to stop. One of her coworkers wrote that she'd always gotten a weird vibe from me, a woman I had met exactly once, for 10 minutes, at a Christmas party, where I'd spent the whole time getting her a drink and holding her coat. Another wrote the quiet ones are always the controlling ones, and 40 people liked it. And I sat there in my own kitchen, being diagnosed as a monster by strangers based on a paragraph written by the person hurting me. That's the genius of going public first. You don't just betray someone. You preload the jury. You make sure that if the truth ever comes out, it has to climb uphill against a crowd that's already decided, already invested, already applauding. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd built a courtroom, seated the jury, and cast me as the defendant, all before I'd finished my morning coffee. And the cruelest part, the part that actually made me put the mug down and grip the edge of the counter, was that I could see her doing the thing she was always so good at. Making people feel chosen, making 200 strangers feel like they were the smart ones, the brave ones, the ones who could see what poor blind Adam couldn't. She was doing to them exactly what she'd done to me for 2 years. And it was working on them exactly the way it had worked on me. I want to tell you I stayed calm. I didn't. Not on the inside. On the inside, something that had been holding my chest together for 2 years just quietly snapped. But on the outside, I got very, very still. And that stillness is the only reason the rest of this story turned out the way it did. Because I didn't call her screaming, I didn't comment, I didn't post a paragraph of my own. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, I opened a blank notes file on my laptop, and I started writing down everything I knew. Not for revenge. Not yet. Just because when your whole reality gets rewritten in one morning, you need to hold on to what's real. And the first real thing I wrote down was a question. If this was so innocent, why did she need to lie about who was there? People don't hide things they're proud of. So I started pulling threads, and this is where it stops being sad and starts being something else. The first thing I did was go back to Priya's original story, the one that started it all, before it got deleted. I'd screenshotted it at 3 a.m. out of pure instinct, the way you grab the railing when you feel yourself falling. Good instinct, because by 8 a.m. it was gone, scrubbed, like it never happened. But I had it, and when I really looked at it, past Damon's arm in my own panic, I saw the tent behind them, one tent. There were supposedly 4 women on this trip. There was one tent and a single air mattress half inflated in the doorway of it, and 2 camp chairs by the fire. Not 4. 2. My hands were steady now. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. There's the falling part, and then there's the part where you hit the ground and realize the ground is solid and you can stand on it. I stood up, I went to our shared computer, the one we use for the wedding budget, the one still logged into her email, because we'd set it up together for vendor confirmations. I want to be clear about something, because people always ask. I did not hack anything. I did not guess a password. This was a family computer, permanently signed in, and I was there for the wedding folder, which I had every right to be in, because I was the one paying the deposits. That folder is where the whole thing came apart, because sitting in the wedding folder, next to the invoice for the venue and the contract for the photographer, was a canceled reservation, a cabin, booked 3 weeks earlier for that exact weekend for 2 guests under her name, and then refunded 4 days ago when she switched it to camping. 2 guests, not 4. And the card used for the deposit wasn't hers. It was mine. She'd used our joint wedding account, the one we'd both been feeding for the ceremony, to book a weekend cabin for herself and one other person, and when the cabin fell through, she'd pivoted to a tent and dressed the whole thing up as a girl's retreat to me and to the internet. And it got worse, because I kept scrolling. There was an email thread with the cabin owner, and in it she'd asked a question that turned my stomach to ice water. She'd asked whether the cabin was discreet and not visible from the road. She'd asked about the checkout policy, if they needed to leave early or stay late. She'd signed one of the emails, and I read it 3 times to make sure. Can't wait, it's been way too long. It's been way too long. This wasn't a woman rekindling a friendship with a struggling old friend whose mom was sick. There was no sick mom in these emails. There was a woman counting down the days to a weekend she'd been imagining for a while, funded by the money we were supposed to be building a life with. I scrolled up further and found the original message where it all started, months back, and it was not him reaching out to apologize like she'd told me. It was her. She had messaged him first. The entire origin story, the mature closure, the wounded friend who needed her, all of it, every word, was something she'd invented to explain a door she had opened herself. I sat back in the chair. I remember the exact sound the house made, which was nothing. Total silence. And in that silence, I understood something that changed the entire shape of my day. This was not a woman who got carried away at a campfire. This was a woman who had been planning a weekend with another man for 3 weeks, funding it with our wedding money and building a public alibi in advance, so that when I noticed, the crowd would already be on her side. She hadn't been careless. She'd been early. And that told me the most important thing of all, which was that she was going to do this again after the wedding, except then it would be with my last name, my mortgage, and my kids. That was the moment I stopped being heartbroken and started being efficient. I made 3 phone calls before 9 in the morning. The first was to the venue. I'd read our contract more carefully than she ever had, because I'm the one who reads contracts. And I knew that the full refund cancellation window closed at the end of that very week. 1 more week, and we'd have lost the entire deposit. I canceled it. $12,000 back to the account in 1 phone call on the very day I found out. The coordinator asked if everything was all right, and I said, it's going to be. The second call was to the joint account itself. I didn't drain it, I want to be clear, because half of it was hers, and I don't take what isn't mine. But I moved my half back to my own account, and I froze the shared card, the one she'd used for the cabin, effective immediately. If she wanted to fund the next romantic getaway, she could use her own money. The third call was the one that mattered. It was to my brother Mark, who is a family lawyer, and who had gently once a year earlier asked me if I was sure, and I had gotten annoyed at him for asking. I called him and I said, "Remember when you asked if I was sure? I'm sure now, the other way." And he said, "Tell me everything," and I did. And here's what I learned that morning that I'll pass on to anyone listening who is standing where I was standing. We weren't married yet. That meant there was no divorce, no assets to split, no lawyer needed to unwind years of tangled accounts. There was just a ring, a canceled venue, and a lease with both our names that renewed in 2 months. I could walk out clean if I moved fast and moved calm. So that's what I did. But I wasn't done, because there was still the matter of 6,000 people who thought I was a warden. Now, I want to say something here, because this is the part where a lot of people would have posted the receipts, screenshotted the cabin reservation, the canceled 2-guest booking, the joint card, splashed it across her comment section, and let the internet do to her what she'd tried to do to me. I thought about it. I sat with the screenshots open and my thumb over the button, and I imagined the sweet, hot rush of watching her mentions turn on her. And then I closed the laptop. Not because I'm a saint. I'm not. But because I realized that if I posted, the story would become a fight. Two people slinging screenshots, and people would pick teams and argue in the comments, and by Tuesday it would just be noise. And I didn't want noise. I wanted out, clean, with my name intact and my dignity unspent. So I did something better than exposing her. I let her expose herself. Here's how. She was still up at the lake, still riding the high of her viral little post, still getting comments telling her she was brave. She had no idea the venue was canceled, the card was frozen, or that I'd been awake since 3. So I sent her one text. Just one. I kept it warm. I said, "You're right. I've been in my head about the wedding and I took it out on you. I don't want to be that guy. Let's talk when you're home. I love you." And then I waited. Because I knew Rebecca. I knew that the second she felt safe, the second she believed she'd won and I'd folded, she would get comfortable. And comfortable people get careless. She wrote back within 4 minutes, all warmth now that she thought I'd surrendered. "Thank you for saying that. I really needed to hear it. I'll be home Sunday night." Damon says, "Hi, Lowell. Be nice." Damon says hi. Fi sent to me herself, casually, because she thought the danger had passed. I screenshotted it, of course. Not to post, to keep. Then I spent the next 2 days doing the least dramatic, most devastating thing a person in my position can do. I packed. Calmly, over 2 days, I separated our lives. I took the things that were mine. The furniture I'd bought before her. The tools, the books, the espresso machine my father gave me before he died. I left everything that was ours, or hers, spotless and in place. I paid my half of the rent through the end of the notice period so she could never say I left her stranded. I wrote a check to cover the exact amount of the frozen card, so nobody could ever claim I stole $1. And I found a small apartment across town, first month down, keys in hand, before she ever pulled back into the driveway. Those 2 days were the strangest of my life, because on the outside, I was the calmest I'd ever been. Folding shirts, taping boxes, labeling everything in neat handwriting, and on the inside I kept catching myself waiting for a version of the truth that would let me stay. That's the part nobody warns you about. Even with the emails open on my screen, even with the one tent and the frozen card and the "it's been way too long," some animal part of my brain kept whispering that maybe there was an explanation. Maybe if I just asked the right way, she'd have an answer that made all of this a misunderstanding, and we could laugh about it in 10 years. I let myself feel that. And then I made myself reread the email where she asked if the cabin was hidden from the road, and the whisper went quiet, because you do not ask if a place is hidden from the road when you have nothing to hide. Every time the doubt came back, I fed it that one sentence, and every time, it starved. By Sunday afternoon, the boxes were in the new place. The bed was made. There was coffee in the cupboard, and a single plate and a single fork in the drying rack. And I sat on the floor of an apartment, with no couch yet, and felt something I hadn't expected to feel, which was relief so total it almost knocked me over. I wasn't destroyed. I was free. I just had one more conversation to get through first. She had built her whole strategy around me being the emotional one, the reactive one, the man who could be provoked into looking crazy, so I gave her nothing to react to. I just quietly stopped being available to be her villain. Sunday night, she came home to a house that was half empty and completely clean. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the only chair left, with a folder in front of me. She stood in the doorway with her bag and her sunburn and her rehearsed little speech about boundaries. And she looked around at the missing couch and the bare walls, and I watched the speech die in her throat. I thought a lot about how I'd feel in this moment. I'd expected rage or grief, or the shaking that comes when you've been holding something in for days. Instead, I felt nothing but a strange, level quiet, like the surface of a lake with no wind on it. She'd spent months teaching me that my feelings were the problem, that my reactions were the crime, and now, at the exact moment, she needed me to explode, so she could point and say, "See, this is what I've been dealing with." I had nothing to give her. No scene, no screaming, just a man at a kitchen table with a folder. "Adam," she said, "what is this?" And I slid the folder across the table, not the screenshots, not the cabin booking. Something simpler. It was the venue cancellation confirmation, and a single printed copy of her own public post. The one about insecure men who won't let a girl breathe. I'd printed it so it couldn't be deleted. "I saw your post," I said. "It's a good post. A lot of people agree with you." So I decided to stop being the problem. She started fast, the way liars do. It was a group hang. Damon was going through it. I was reading into things. She had a whole speech, and she'd clearly practiced it on the drive home. And I let her get all the way to the end, every word, because I wanted her to spend her entire arsenal before she understood that I already knew there was no war left to win. When she finally ran out, I asked her one question, just one. I said, "Who was the second guest on the cabin you booked 3 weeks ago with our wedding money?" And the room went quiet in a way I will remember for the rest of my life. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Because there was no version of the answer that survived being said out loud. Her mouth opened and closed. And then, because people like Rebecca always reach for the same weapon, she pivoted. "You went through my things," she said, trying to make me the invader. "You're spying on me. This is exactly what I told everyone about." And I almost laughed, because I understood in that moment that she was still, even now, cornered, trying to write the post. Still trying to make me the warden. So I stood up. I told her the truth plainly, no yelling. I said the venue was canceled and the deposit was back, that I'd covered every dollar so she could never call me a thief, that my half of the rent was paid through the notice, that my things were gone and her things were untouched, and that the engagement was over. Not tomorrow. Not after a talk. Now. Today. In one day. She said I was overreacting. She said we could fix this. She said, and this is the part that told me I'd made the only correct choice, she said, "You're really going to throw away 2 years over one camping trip?" One camping trip. As if the trip was the crime. As if the crime wasn't the 3 weeks of planning, the stolen money, the ex she'd lied about for months, and the public post designed to turn our friends into a jury before I'd even had a chance to speak. I looked at her and I said the only thing left to say. "You didn't lose me at the campfire? Rebecca, you lost me the moment you decided the internet should meet me before I did." And I picked up my one folder and I walked out the door I'd walked through 1,000 times. And I did not look back. And the strangest thing happened, which is that the second the cold air hit my face, I could breathe. Turns out I was the one who hadn't been breathing for months. Now you'd think that's the end. Man discovers betrayal, man leaves with dignity, credits roll. But there's a reason I'm telling you this and not just journaling it, and it's what happened after. Because Rebecca had made one strategic error that she didn't understand for another week. She had gone public first. She had told 6,000 people, in writing, that her fiancé was a controlling, insecure man who wouldn't let her live. She'd made me the villain in a story she assumed I'd never contradict, because she assumed I'd chase her, beg her, blow up her comments, and prove her right. When I did none of that, when I simply vanished from her life without a single dramatic post, her own narrative started to rot from the inside. The first crack came from Priya. Remember Priya, the friend who posted the story that started it all? It turned out Priya hadn't been invited to any romantic weekend. She'd been invited over text, to cover for me. Say it's a girl's thing if Adam asks. Priya had said yes in the moment and felt sick about it for 2 days. And when she saw Rebecca's viral post trashing me, a man who had once driven her to the ER at 2 in the morning when Rebecca wouldn't wake up, Priya was done. She didn't come to me. She just quietly commented on Rebecca's viral post, under her own name, 4 words. "This isn't what happened." And then she left it there, and refused to explain, and let those 4 words sit under 200 applauding comments like a crack in a windshield. People started asking questions. Not me. Them. The maid of honor who'd typed "preach" texted Rebecca privately, and Rebecca, panicking, said too much. And the maid of honor screenshotted it and sent it to 2 other bridesmaids, and within a week the same social circle that had cheered Rebecca on had quietly, completely turned. Because here's the thing about building your reputation on a lie in front of an audience. The audience remembers. And the audience does math. 4 women, 1 tent, a canceled wedding, no explanation from the insecure man. A best friend saying this isn't what happened. An ex named Damon who suddenly appeared in every photo. People are not as stupid as liars need them to be. I didn't have to say a word. I never posted. I never explained. I let the silence I'd bought with my dignity do all the talking, and it turned out silence was louder than any receipt I could have dropped. Rebecca deleted the post 9 days later. Then she deleted the account. By then it was too late, because the story had already rewritten itself without her, and the new version, the true one, didn't need me to narrate it. Damon, for the record, was gone within a month. Whatever they had, whatever the tent and the stolen cabin money were supposed to become, it didn't survive contact with reality. Because it turned out he wasn't leaving anyone for her, he was just a man who liked being wanted by someone else's fiancé. When the wedding was gone and the drama dried up, and there was no more triangle to be the exciting corner of, he stopped answering. She'd blown up a 2-year relationship with a man who reads contracts and pays his half of the rent, for a weekend with a man who ghosted her by the next full moon. I heard all of this, secondhand, from Priya actually, who apologized to me over coffee months later, and who I've forgiven because she was the one honest person in a dishonest weekend, and she paid for it too. She told me something over that coffee that I still think about. She said Rebecca had never expected me to leave. That in the group chat, before it all fell apart, Rebecca had actually said the quiet part out loud. That Adam always comes back. That Adam always apologizes. That Adam would never blow up a wedding he'd already paid for. She had done the math on me and gotten every number right except the last one. She'd built her entire plan on the assumption that I was the kind of man who would rather keep a lie he could live inside than face a truth that cost him everything. And for 2 years, honestly, she'd been correct. That was the version of me she'd trained. What she didn't account for was that a man who reads contracts also reads people. Eventually, if you give him a cold enough morning and a clear enough photo. Priya also told me the trip hadn't even been fun, that Rebecca had spent half of it checking her phone, waiting for me to blow up so the post would land harder. And when I went quiet instead, when I sent that warm little "you're right, let's talk when you're home," it had actually ruined her whole weekend. She couldn't enjoy the crime because the victim wouldn't scream. I'm not proud of how good that felt to hear, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't. Me? I got the $12,000 back. I got the espresso machine on my new counter. I got a small apartment that was quiet in a way my old house never was. And slowly, over those months, I got myself back too, piece by piece, in ways I didn't even notice until they'd already happened. I noticed one morning that I'd stopped pre-apologizing. I'd order coffee. And if they got it wrong, I'd just say so, plainly, without softening it into 3 sentences of "sorry, no worries if not. Totally my fault." I noticed I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. For 2 years, a text had meant a test, a mood to read, a landmine to step around. And now it was just a text. My friends started telling me I laughed more, that I seemed taller somehow, and one of them, a guy who'd known me since high school and who I'd stopped seeing much because Rebecca found him exhausting, said the thing that stuck with me. He said, "Man, I didn't realize how small you'd gotten until you got big again." I hadn't realized it either. That's the terrifying part. You don't feel yourself shrinking while it happens. You just wake up one day 2 sizes smaller than you were, and you call it love. It took losing everything on a single cold morning to see the shape of the cage, and by then the door was already open, because she'd opened it herself, standing next to a campfire, telling the world I was the one who couldn't let a girl breathe. And about 4 months after the worst night of my life, I got a text from an unknown number that I knew. The second I saw it was Rebecca on a friend's phone, because I'd blocked hers. It said, "I know I hurt you. I've grown so much. I think we owe it to ourselves to talk. You were the most stable thing I ever had, and I threw it away. Please." The most stable thing I ever had. Not the man I loved. Not my best friend. The most stable thing, like I was a piece of furniture she missed now that the exciting thing had left. And I want you to know that I sat with that text for a long time, longer than I'm proud of. Because 2 years is 2 years, and the heart is stupid and slow. But then I remembered the tent. One tent, and I remembered 3 dots appearing and disappearing at 3 in the morning while she decided how to lie to me. And I remembered 6,000 people being told I was a warden by the woman I was about to give my whole life to. And I typed back the only reply that felt true, and then I blocked that number too. I wrote, "You didn't lose me at the campfire. You lost me the moment you decided the internet should meet me before I did. Take care of yourself, Rebecca." And I put the phone down, and I made a coffee in the machine my father gave me, and I stood at my own window in my own quiet apartment, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, nobody was watching, nobody was judging, and I could finally actually breathe. People ask me sometimes if I regret not exposing her, not posting the cabin receipt, not dragging her through the comments the way she tried to drag me. And I tell them the truth, which is no, because revenge would have made it a story about the 2 of us, and I didn't want to be tied to her for one more day, not even as her enemy. Walking away, clean, calm, with every dollar accounted for, and my dignity in my own hands, wasn't me being weak. It was the loudest thing I've ever done. She wanted the world to think I couldn't let a girl breathe. In the end, I was the only one in that whole story who could. I found out my engagement was over from a photo I wasn't supposed to see, but I ended it from a place she never saw coming, which was calm. And if you're out there right now, wide awake at 3 in the morning, staring at 3 dots, feeling the ground fall out from under you, I need you to hear the one thing it took me 2 years and one very long day to learn. The person trying hardest to convince the world you're the crazy one is almost always the one with something to hide. Don't argue with them. Don't chase them. Just get very, very still, find out what's real, and then walk out into the cold air and remember how to breathe. Thank you so much for watching till the end. Wishing you all the best, stay healthy, and take care.